The rain had washed the city clean through the night. Streetlights reflected across the wet asphalt like fractured mirrors. Towering glass buildings loomed silently over the early dawn as Madison Gray pulled her car into the underground parking garage. She didn't bother to check the time anymore. Being late wasn't her concern. Staying alive was. Threats had escalated over the past weeks. Messages from unknown numbers, security cameras mysteriously cut, foreign cars idling outside her house for hours, vanishing before anyone could trace them. Her security team knew, but nothing changed. She understood now. Money couldn't buy the kind of safety she needed. In the passenger seat sat Lucas Ford, her head of security. He was silent. Madison watched him from the corner of her eye as they rode the elevator upward. She remembered telling him just days earlier that someone inside the company might be behind these threats. He hadn't responded. That silence had sealed her decision. As the elevator doors opened to her private floor, Madison stepped out without turning. "You're done here, Lucas." Silence. The elevator remained open. Madison turned. His expression wasn't one of anger or betrayal, it was exhaustion. She felt an unfamiliar weight settle in her chest but forced it down. "I owe you thanks," she said softly, "but I can't trust you anymore." Lucas said nothing. Slowly, he nodded. And without another word, the elevator doors closed. Madison had no way of knowing. In less than a week, she'd understand why Lucas never walked away. 3 nights later at 4:13 a.m., Madison wandered her silent house, unable to sleep. Her mind replayed every threat, every unanswered question. She reached for the kitchen light, but something in the window made her stop cold. A silhouette, motionless, standing just beyond the glass, holding something. Her breath caught. Her sister's bracelet. Then the glass moved. Before she could scream, a hand gripped the back of her neck. Her body went rigid with terror. A second man. He'd entered silently from the rear. She felt his breath on her ear. "You talk too much, Madison." Pain lanced through her wrist as he twisted until she heard the crack. She struggled, breathless, knowing this was how it ended. Then the silence shattered. A gunshot. The man's grip faltered. Madison collapsed onto the floor. Before her, the first man fell to his knees. A red bloom spread across his forehead. Behind him, standing in the doorway, was Lucas. Gun still raised. But Lucas wasn't watching the man he'd just killed. He was watching the second man. A heartbeat later, another shot rang out. When Madison looked again, both men were down. The only sound was the steady rhythm of rain tapping on her shattered front door. Lucas lowered his weapon, slowly, deliberately. Madison lay frozen. The man she had fired had just saved her life. She awoke in the hospital, white walls, machines beeping, and beside her bed, Lucas. For a long time, Madison said nothing. She watched him. The silence between them stretched heavy as the heart monitor counted each fragile second. Finally, her voice cracked. "Why did you come back?" Lucas looked up. His eyes were dark hollows, sleepless and worn. But behind them burned something deeper, "Because I swore I'd protect you." Nothing more. Madison closed her eyes, and something inside her, something she hadn't felt in years, broke. She remembered her father's words from so long ago. "Real bodyguards aren't the ones who protect you when they're paid. They're the ones who stay, even after you've betrayed them." That night, Madison Gray redefined what trust meant. And it was only the beginning. Madison didn't leave the hospital for 5 days. Reporters circled like vultures outside the glass doors, spinning headlines of the attempted assassination of one of the city's most powerful CEOs. But none of them knew the truth. Not yet. Inside her room, the silence between her and Lucas thickened. He refused to leave her side, not out of duty, but because every moment without her in sight seemed unbearable. She watched him in the darkness more than once, his figure rigid beside the door, as if waiting for something worse. Finally, on the 6th day, she asked him, "Who sent them?" Lucas didn't lie. "I don't know." "But you came back, without knowing." "I couldn't wait to find out." Those words pierced deeper than any bullet. Madison turned her face to the window, unable to meet his gaze. When her release finally came, Lucas didn't ask if she wanted him back. He simply followed her home. And she let him. The mansion was cold, not just from the absence of heating, but from the presence of fear. Madison paced room to room, tracing every broken lock, every shattered window pane. Lucas moved silently behind her, inspecting, memorizing. "I built this house to keep people out," she said quietly. Lucas responded without turning. And that's exactly why they got in. She looked at him then, realizing for the first time that Lucas wasn't the man she'd hired 5 years ago. His eyes held something else now. Not just loyalty, not just determination. Guilt. "Tell me," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me what you're not saying." He hesitated. Then the words fell like stones. "I know who trained them." The night stretched long as Lucas spoke for the first time about the world he'd buried. Years before Madison had met him, Lucas had served in a covert unit, not military, not government. A nameless, silent organization designed to handle threats before they became known to the world. He had walked away. Or so he thought. "They weren't after you for money," he said softly. "They wanted you silenced. You know something, or you're about to." Madison's mind reeled. She shook her head. "I'm a CEO, Lucas. I run a company." "Exactly." His eyes burned into hers. "Someone inside your company is funding them." The world shifted beneath her. Trust, power, safety, all illusions. Her voice cracked when she asked, "What do I do?" Lucas didn't hesitate. "You let me protect you. Not as an employee, not as a bodyguard, as the only man left willing to die for her." In the days that followed, Lucas transformed the mansion into a fortress. Motion sensors, steel reinforcements, hidden panic rooms, but walls could only protect the body, not the heart. Madison watched him work in silence, remembering her father's words again, remembering how trust could be broken, not just by betrayal, but by abandonment. And Lucas Ford had never abandoned her, even when she'd ordered him to. Even when she'd fired him. The rain returned one night, and Madison stood by the window, listening. Lucas stood behind her. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" she asked quietly. A long pause. "Because if I had, you never would have trusted me. I fired you, and I stayed." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't deserve that." Lucas finally spoke, voice like steel. "No, you deserved better." The first attack had failed, but Madison and Lucas both knew it was only the beginning. Inside the corporate towers of Gray Industries, someone was hunting her, and they had resources no outsider should have had. Lucas began investigating, silently, without Madison's approval. He returned to the office as a ghost. He no longer wore a suit. His face, once familiar to employees, now blurred into the shadows. He traced electronic footprints, security reports, financial discrepancies. And one night, he found it. A name. Thomas Creed. Chief Financial Officer. A man who had sat at Madison's right hand for 3 years. Lucas returned to the mansion that night. Madison was waiting. Her hands trembled when she heard the name. "I trusted him." Lucas said nothing. Madison's voice cracked. "He was there when I buried my father." Lucas nodded once. "That's why he's perfect." The betrayal sliced deeper than the blade that had nearly ended her life. But worse was yet to come. Lucas placed a small device on the table. Madison stared. "What's that?" "A recording." "Of what?" Lucas's eyes darkened. "Of him giving the kill order." She couldn't breathe. Lucas pressed play, and her world shattered. The next morning, Madison was no longer the same woman. She entered the office building with Lucas beside her, not as a bodyguard, but as an executioner waiting for command. She summoned Thomas Creed. The man arrived, calm, collected. His smile was surgical. Until he saw Lucas, his face cracked. Madison stood. "I heard your voice last night, Thomas." Silence. No excuses. Her voice was a blade. Only answers. Creed's gaze flicked to Lucas, then back to Madison. And then he smiled. "That wasn't my voice." Lucas took a step forward, but Madison raised a hand. Creed leaned forward. "You think this is about you?" Madison's breath faltered. "This company, this empire, it's built on secrets, Madison. Your father knew that." "My father built this to protect people." Creed laughed softly. "No, he built it to protect you." A beat. And now that protection is gone. The gunshot echoed. Employees screamed outside the glass office, but no one dared enter. Lucas lowered his weapon, smoke curling from the barrel. Thomas Creed's body slumped forward across the desk. Madison stood frozen, staring at the blood spreading across the floor. Lucas's voice broke the silence. He reached for the gun under the table. Madison didn't respond. She simply turned and walked away. Lucas followed. But something inside both of them had changed. Killing an assassin was one thing. Killing a friend, that left scars no fortress could defend. They buried Thomas Creed's body that night. Not literally. Lucas handled the cover-up, scrubbing footage, erasing files, ensuring the company's narrative. Creed had resigned and disappeared. Madison couldn't look at herself in the mirror. But Lucas knew the truth. Killing Creed had bought them time, but not safety. The organization hunting Madison wasn't dead. It was awakened. The next attack came without warning. A blackout hit the mansion at 2:14 a.m. Lucas moved first. He pulled Madison from her bed and dragged her into the secondary panic room, a place she didn't even know existed. "Who are they?" she whispered, shaking. Lucas loaded his weapon. "People worse than me." The gunfire started. Madison screamed once, but Lucas covered her mouth. He stared into her eyes, calm, unflinching. "Listen to me. Whatever happens, you stay silent." Outside the door, boots echoed. Lucas's breathing slowed. 3, 2, 1. The door exploded inward. Lucas fired once, then twice. But the third man came from behind. Lucas never saw him. The blow caught him at the base of his skull. He fell. Madison shrieked. The masked man aimed at her chest, and then the shot never came. Lucas, half-conscious, pulled a hidden blade from his boot and drove it upward. The assassin collapsed over him. Silence. Lucas coughed blood. His vision blurred. Madison crawled to him, sobbing. "Don't die," she whispered. Lucas smiled, blood staining his teeth. "Not yet." When Madison carried him out of the panic room, Lucas Ford was no longer her bodyguard. He was her broken soldier. She called no ambulance, no police. She trusted no one. She stitched his wounds herself, trembling hands soaked in blood. She stayed awake beside him for 40 hours. When Lucas finally opened his eyes, his voice was a rasp. "Why didn't you run?" Madison didn't answer. She didn't have to. Lucas saw it in her eyes. She couldn't lose him. Not him. Not after everyone else. In the weeks that followed, Madison disappeared from the public eye. Rumors spread that she'd been killed, that she'd fled the country. But in truth, she sat at Lucas's bedside every night, watching him heal. And in those nights, something happened. Walls broke. Not just around the mansion, but around their hearts. One night, Lucas reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. And when he said her name, just her name, she cried for the first time since her father's funeral. Madison Gray was no longer the woman who ran an empire. She was just a woman who didn't want to be alone. And Lucas Ford? He wasn't her protector. He was her reason to survive. Lucas didn't recover fully. He moved slower, breathed harder, but his mind remained razor sharp. He taught Madison everything: how to load a weapon, how to move silently, how to spot a threat, because he knew the final attack wasn't a question. It was a countdown. It began at dawn, not at the mansion, at her office. A message. 2 words. "He's coming." Madison didn't hesitate. She drove herself. Lucas sat beside her, weak but armed. She knew who he was. Not Thomas Creed. Not the assassins. The man behind all of them. Her father's old partner. A man she'd thought long dead. Victor Harlow. The man who had built Gray Industries alongside her father. The man who had wanted her dead since the day her father chose her instead of him. The confrontation wasn't cinematic. No explosions, no gunfights, just silence. Victor stood in her office, alone, smiling. "Hello, Madison." She raised her gun. "I'm not my father." "I know. That's why I can kill you." Victor laughed softly. "I taught him everything, including how to pick an heir. He chose wrong." Lucas stepped forward. "I disagree." Victor glanced at him. "And yet, here you stand, broken, dying." Lucas's voice was steel. "Not yet." Victor's eyes flicked back to Madison. "You think killing me ends this?" Madison's hands trembled. "No." She fired. Once, Victor staggered. Twice, he collapsed. Lucas didn't move. He watched Madison step forward, watched her look down at the man who had hunted her since childhood, and watched her whisper, "It ends when I say it ends." Victor Harlow died with a smile, because even in death he'd won. He'd forced Madison Gray to become him. A killer, a survivor. And as she walked from that office, Lucas trailing behind her like a shadow, Madison understood. She would never be safe, not truly. But she wasn't afraid anymore, because she wasn't alone. The rain returned, as it always did. Madison Gray stood at the edge of the cliff, overlooking the city she no longer recognized as hers. Beside her stood Lucas. He was thinner now, paler, but alive, just like her. "I thought it would feel different," she whispered. Lucas said nothing. She turned. "After killing him." Lucas looked at her, eyes hollow but honest. "It does." Madison frowned. "How? You're still breathing." A silence, then softly, "Is that enough?" Lucas hesitated. "For people like us?" He met her gaze. "It has to be." Weeks passed. The company survived. Victor's crimes were buried beneath layers of new leadership, fake news reports, and carefully crafted narratives. Madison stepped down as CEO. No announcement, no press release. She simply vanished. And when people whispered her name, they spoke of ghosts. Lucas healed, his body slower than his mind. But every morning he stood, and every night he waited for Madison to speak. It took her months. One evening, watching the rain, she finally said, "I don't know who I am anymore." Lucas sat beside her. "You're Madison Gray. That name means nothing. It means everything." She turned to him, tears silent. "I'm scared. I know. I don't want to be alone." Lucas took her hand. "You're not." A long silence. Then softly, "Promise." Lucas didn't answer with words. He simply pulled her into his arms. And for the first time since her father died, Madison Gray let herself fall asleep. Safe. Not because the world wasn't dangerous, but because someone stayed. Even after she'd pushed him away, even after she'd fired him, even after everything, someone stayed. And sometimes survival wasn't about killing. It was about who stood beside you when you couldn't stand anymore. The rain kept falling, but for Madison Gray, it no longer mattered.